Are you ready for the rest of Chapter 2 in Nightmare Mountain? I hope so, because there's still some good info coming up in this chapter. If you were following along, I'm on page 9, about the middle of the page. So this is Chapter 2, Part 2 of Nightmare Mountain. Next, Molly took the doll Fifi downstairs. She put Bucky outside and hid the doll in the kitchen. When she let Bucky in again, he searched until he found the doll. He carried Fifi to Molly and dropped the doll at her feet. Then he stood looking expectant, as if to say, "Hurry and hide Fifi again, so I can find it." Molly enjoyed the game as much as Bucky did, and they played it until Glendon got home from school. She knew when he was coming home because she heard Uncle Phil holler, "Glendon! Hey, there's a beautiful young lady here to see you. Come on!" Molly ran out on the porch. She saw an orange school bus turn around at the end of the lane and head back toward town. Uncle Phil and Aunt Karen joined her, and Aunt Karen put her arm around Molly's shoulders. A solemn boy trudged toward the house. Solemn means serious, and trudged means he just walked kind of like his feet were heavy. He really wasn't in any hurry to get there. He trudged with a solemn look on his face. Molly smiled and waved at him. Her eyes were shining with excitement. "Hurry and meet Molly," Uncle Phil said when Glendon was nearly to the house. "We've been telling her how glad we are that she's come," Aunt Karen said. "I'm tired of being the only female in this house." She smiled at Molly. "I always wanted a daughter," she said. "I think I'll pretend you are mine while you're here." Glendon stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He didn't smile. He didn't say he was glad to see her. He just looked at her. Molly stepped down and stood beside him. She was surprised to see that he was no taller than she was. Since Uncle Phil was so big, she had expected his son to be tall too. Glendon's brown hair was short and straight, like hers, and he also had braces on his teeth. "Hi, cousin," Molly said. "Hey, we almost look like twins." Glendon glared at her, as if she had insulted him. Her smile faded and she tried again. "I was sorry you couldn't come to the airport," she said. "When does your school get out?" "Next week." "Mine too. I had to take my final test early," she said. Glendon didn't reply. Maybe he's just shy, Molly thought. Maybe it's hard for him to talk to people he doesn't know well. She tried to think of something more to say to put him at ease. "You kids have fun getting acquainted," Uncle Phil said. "I have work to do." He headed back toward the barn. "I have to start dinner," Aunt Karen said. She went into the kitchen, leaving Molly and Glendon to stare at each other. "I didn't mind getting out early," Molly said, "and my teacher said this trip would be educational." No answer. The silence seemed awkward to Molly, but Glendon didn't appear to notice. He went inside, climbed the stairs to his room, and shut the door. Molly wondered how long it would take for him to relax. She scratched Bucky's ears, picked up Fifi, and went upstairs to get the tin of cookies she had brought along. She sat in her room a while, petting Bucky and wishing Glendon would come out of his room. He didn't. Finally, she took the cookies downstairs and gave them to Aunt Karen. "I made them myself," she said. "What kind are they?" "Basically, I used Mom's chocolate chip recipe." "What a treat. I remember her cookies, but I seldom have time to bake desserts." Molly could understand that. It took her one whole afternoon to bake these cookies. After the batter was already mixed, she realized that she didn't have any chocolate chips. So she used raisins and a bag of peanut M&Ms instead. She thought the result was better than the original recipe. Glendon finally came downstairs at dinner time. Aunt Karen dished up the food on each person's plate and carried the plates to the table. Molly gulped when she saw the generous servings of green beans and carrots on her plate. She hated vegetables. Every kind except maybe corn. But she had promised her mom that she would eat whatever Aunt Karen and Uncle Phil served. She didn't want to break her promise at the very first meal. "We grow all of our own vegetables," Uncle Phil said, as if he could read her mind. "They're better than what you can buy." Also, Aunt Karen added, "I have a few food allergies, so our meals tend to be simple." Molly tried to look enthusiastic. She was glad to see a hot turkey sandwich on her plate, along with the beans and carrots. She put a large piece of bread on her fork and a tiny piece of carrot, and then dipped both of them in the turkey gravy. Maybe the flavor of the bread and gravy would camouflage the carrots, and she would be able to eat them without gagging. As she put the food in her mouth, she realized Glendon was watching her. She glanced at him, but he quickly looked away. Molly wondered if he had guessed how much she disliked vegetables. Something in his expression made her suspect that he knew. "I love turkey sandwiches," she said. "Sometimes we have veggie dinners," Glendon said. 3 vegetables, and that's all." Molly looked at him closely. He was definitely smirking. For the first time, she had doubts about being away from home for an entire month. The next morning, she was relieved to see that breakfast was scrambled eggs and toast. After last night's conversation, she was afraid she might be expected to eat broccoli for breakfast. At home, she and Mom usually had cereal, or else they ate leftovers from the night before. Molly's favorite breakfast was cold pizza. Have any of you ever had that? It's really good. I like it a lot. Molly took her bottle of cod liver oil pills to the table with her. She opened it and removed 1 capsule, putting the pill in her mouth and taking a big gulp of orange juice to help her swallow it. It wasn't until she set the juice glass back down that she realized Glendon was staring at her again. "What was that pill you took?" he asked. "Are you sick?" Molly thought she detected a note of hope in the question. Maybe Glendon was wishing she would get sick and have to go back home. "It was a cod liver oil pill," she explained. "I take one every morning, and I promised Mom I wouldn't forget." "Cod liver oil? Yuck," Glendon said, wrinkling up his nose. "They aren't so bad," Molly said. "There's vitamin A in them and some other vitamins." "We don't take vitamin pills," Glendon said. "Mom thinks the cod liver oil pills help keep me healthy," Molly said. "I hardly ever catch a cold." "Then maybe Glendon should take some," Uncle Phil said. "He was sick all last winter." Glendon glared at Molly again. Clearly, he thought cod liver oil pills were a horrible idea. No doubt he would blame her if his parents decided that he should take them. "I don't know if they really help or not," Molly said. "How many days of school did you miss the year before you were sick?" Uncle Phil asked. "I didn't miss any," Molly said. "There, you see," Uncle Phil said. "Glendon was sick half a dozen times." "I had chicken pox," Glendon said. "Cod liver oil doesn't prevent chicken pox." "Once you had chicken pox. Once. The rest of the time you had head colds." Molly decided it must be wise to change the subject. "Bucky slept in my room last night," she said. "Dogs can always tell when someone likes them," Aunt Karen said. "He'll probably want to sleep in your room the whole time you're here." "No, he won't," Glendon said. "He wants to sleep in my room, but I forgot and shut my door." He glared at Molly, and his lower jaw jutted out as if daring her to argue. Have you noticed how many times I've said the word glared? It seems like that's all he does. Molly saw Aunt Karen and Uncle Phil look at each other in a knowing way. She didn't say that her door had also been shut, and Bucky scratched at it until she opened it. Bucky, with Fifi in his mouth, had trotted in, curled up on the rug beside her bed, and stayed there all night. Glendon acted like he thought she was trying to take Bucky away from him or something. What a dope! "You better hurry, Glendon, or you'll miss the school bus," Aunt Karen said. Molly spent the day watching the llamas and playing hide the doll with Bucky. Bucky's strong sense of smell amazed her. He even found Fifi when Molly climbed partway up the mountain and buried the doll in a snowbank. When Glendon got home from school, he went straight to his room and shut the door. Molly tried not to show how disappointed she was. Was he going to ignore her for the whole month? She had hoped they would go for a hike or play cards or something. She wanted to show him how Bucky could find Fifi. Instead, she read part of the book about llamas that Uncle Phil had loaned her. When she grew tired of reading, she knocked on the door of Glendon's room. "Would you like to play a game?" she asked when he opened the door. "I don't care much for games," he said. "What do you like to do after school?" "Well, usually I experiment with my chemistry set or I work on my models." "Could I see your models?" Just then Aunt Karen came up the stairs carrying a stack of clean towels. "Good idea," she said. Show Molly the ship you're building." Reluctantly, which means he really didn't want to, Glendon led her into his bedroom. One whole wall was covered with shelves on which sat a variety of model cars, trains, and ships. There were even some models of dinosaurs that he had made. "Did you make all of these?" Molly said. "How long does it take to make one?" "It depends on the kit," Glendon said. A nearly completed model ship sat on a card table. The ship looked like it contained hundreds of tiny plastic parts. "How do you know which piece goes where?" Molly asked. Glendon pointed to a printed sheet of directions. "I follow the instructions," he said. "Haven't you ever made anything?" "I make collages out of cloth," Molly said. "I've never made a model like these. It looks like fun." While she was looking at the model ship on the card table, Bucky trotted into the room carrying Fifi in his mouth, wagging his tail as he dropped the doll at Molly's feet. "What does Bucky have?" Glendon asked as he peered at Fifi. "It's a rag doll that I made." "Bucky shouldn't play with that," Glendon said. "Why not?" "He might bite the buttons off. He might choke." "He doesn't chew on the doll. I hide it and he finds it." Glendon glared at her again. "Bucky is my dog," he said, "and I don't want him playing with that doll." "He won't choke, honest. Watch, I'll show you what we do." Molly bent over, reaching for Fifi. She suspected that Glendon wasn't worried about the button at all. He was just being quarrelsome. But if it would make him feel better, she would cut the buttons off. As Molly's hand touched Fifi, Glendon suddenly reached down and tried to snatch the doll away from her. Quickly, Molly grabbed Fifi and held the doll behind her back. "Give me that," Glendon said. "No, Fifi's mine. I made her." "Well, Bucky is my dog, and I say he can't play with your stupid doll." Bucky, apparently thinking this was a new version of the game, rushed behind Molly and lunged at Fifi. His front paws hit Molly in the back, and Molly lurched forward, lost her balance, and collided with the card table. Oh, do you remember what's on the card table, everybody? Not good. The model ship crashed to the floor. Molly looked in dismay at the tiny smashed pieces. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to break your ship." Glendon knelt beside the broken model. "Can you fix it?" Molly asked. He shook his head. "I'm so sorry." "You and your dumb doll." "It was an accident. I didn't know Bucky would jump on me." "Get out," he said. "Get out of my room." Molly walked to the door. Bucky trotted beside her, still looking eagerly at Fifi. What a mess, Molly thought. She hadn't meant to break his ship, but it was his own fault. If he hadn't tried to take Fifi away from her, the accident wouldn't have happened. "Bucky," Glendon said, "sit." Bucky sat. As soon as Molly was out in the hall, Glendon slammed the door. Molly was quite sure she would never be invited to his room again. And that's the end of Chapter 2, Part 2. Next time we will read Chapter 3 of Nightmare Mountain.